This is Wendy Halley, and you're listening to Lucid Cafe. Aloha. Thanks for joining me for another episode of Lucid Cafe, a podcast exploring healing, consciousness, and the complexities of being human. Speaking of healing and consciousness, unlock new pathways of healing and personal growth with the Magical Path Workbook. This experiential workbook offers unique conscious streaming exercises that will teach you how to become your own shaman and expand your understanding of the nature of reality. Plus, it comes with 2 audio tracks to help you safely and easily enter a visionary state to do the otherworldly exercises. Well, get ready for an unforgettable journey of self-discovery by starting your own personal shamanic practice. The Magical Path Workbook is available on Amazon and at the shop on my website, lucidpathwellness.com. Links can be found in the show notes. Today's episode is one of those episodes that I'm extra excited to share with you. I think it's fair to say that the cannabis plant has taken a lot of shit over the years, and yet the gifts she offers us are seemingly endless. Maybe cannabis needs a new slogan, like, the plant that keeps on giving, even if you're an asshole. I really, really enjoyed this conversation, and now that I think about it, I'd say that this was probably the first interview since I started the podcast back in 2018 that left me feeling not only surprised, but excited about possibilities, especially within the realm of healing. My guest, Daniel McQueen, is a psychedelic specialist, psychedelic therapy educator, activist, and author of the book Psychedelic Cannabis. In 2012, he co-founded the Center of Medicinal Mindfulness, which is the first legal plant-based psychedelic therapy center in the United States. Daniel specializes in using cannabis-assisted psychedelic therapy and ketamine-assisted psychedelic therapy as tools for transformation and healing. His work with psychedelic cannabis has created a widespread movement of practitioners across the United States and Canada. He's also a really nice guy. I hope you enjoy my conversation with Daniel McQueen as much as I did. Daniel, thank you so much for joining me today.
Oh, it's a pleasure to be here. Thank you, Wendy.
Yeah, I have been real excited to chat with you because someone I know mentioned your book, Psychedelic Cannabis, and I was like, what? So it wasn't surprising that cannabis was considered a psychedelic because I remember learning that years and years ago, but to be able to use it for therapeutic reasons, that's what was surprising to me. And I would love to learn more about how you came to that conclusion because I don't think it's in the mainstream.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah, it was an interesting journey. So, cannabis, just to invite your audience into this exploration, give a little background that cannabis is technically in scientific literature considered an hallucinogen, so it's not so far outside of the box to consider it a psychedelic. But because it's been so stigmatized in our culture, people, and even in the psychedelic community, even though they use it all the time, it's been minimized as a psychedelic. And so it just didn't quite fit the worldview that we all live in. The war on drugs caused a lot of harm in our communities too. But a friend of mine suggested, he knew I was interested in working with psychedelics as a therapeutic tool. And I was getting married at the time, or I'd just been married, and we were looking at having babies. And the idea of being an underground facilitator wasn't really something that was intriguing to me. And research wasn't either. So he suggested I consider using cannabis as a therapeutic tool. And so we started doing groups with it. And it's not just any medicine, any cannabis that you get off the street, right? It's from really high quality dispensaries here in Colorado. And we also blend the medicine. So I'm happy to talk more about that, but that makes it more of a robust experience. And I started doing these groups with it, and I noticed pretty quickly that people were describing DMT level experiences. And so and then I also noticed that people were shaking a lot in these journey sessions, which was not atypical for MDMA-assisted psychotherapy sessions and what we call somatic psychotherapy. Like their body has to shake out trauma, it has to move it out of the body through trembling and shaking. And then people were telling stories from their group experiences that were akin to MDMA-assisted psychotherapy work. They were re-experiencing their difficult life experiences in a way that they found resolution with, and understanding, acceptance, greater clarity. And the shaking was getting it out, like physically out of their bodies. So I did that for a couple of years. It was mostly group work, and then people started asking me to do individual sessions with them using cannabis. And so I started to work with it in that way as well. And again, it was still very surprising that it worked. And it worked so well, though, I started a whole program with it, wrote the book. And so now we have a clinical training program that's international in scope. And I have a clinic here with 9 facilitators who work with cannabis, and ketamine is, psychedelics. And it's this whole movement now. So it wasn't something I was planning to do at all, but I, followed the threads of the medicine and listened to my intuition and observed the benefits and really just worked to develop it.
How surprised were you to see the results, like in that first group that you guys did?
Yeah, everybody was shocked. And it was like all my friends. We rented a yoga studio in this person, like next to this person's home. And it was, I think I was intuitively drawn to blend the medicines from the very beginning, just from my experience of smoking sativas and indicas and hybrids and things. And my friend, Barina, who's also one of our lawyers now, she said, after the session, she said, "Daniel, if I didn't know and trust you, I would swear you put DMT in that." And Burrito is a very level-headed human being, so I started to really pay attention after that. And I thought it would be a good teaching tool. I thought it would be an interesting experience, but we had no idea it was going to be this potent. And then as we've developed it, so just give you an idea what they're like. It's not uncommon for people to describe psilocybin mushroom-like experiences with inner visuals, right? So people are having inner visuals that maybe as potent as like smoking DMT even, so like hyper colorful, hyper vivid. But it has an emotional support that's similar to working with MDMA as well. So it's not like as feeling out of control or, losing it as psilocybin. And that's like the primary difference between cannabis and other psychedelics is when you smoke it in the right set and setting is you don't really lose your sense of agency. And if you choose to or if you go into an ego dissolution experience, you're still choosing to go into it, right? It's not just like forcing you into that space. So as a therapeutic tool, people who have a lot of trauma, losing your agency is how they obtain that trauma to begin with. So healing on our own terms and not having to lose our agency by taking a big medicine to fully surrender into the experience is a healing process itself. It's part of its therapeutic value is the ability to stay in your locus of control, so to speak. So it was shocking, and we hear it all the time now, and it's almost like an inside joke that we call it just cannabis. You're just smoking cannabis, right? It's no big deal. That people are, experienced psychonauts are coming out of these experiences saying they're the most intense journey they've ever had, and so it still surprises me, even after it's been like 9 years or something like that.
When I was reading your book, that's the thing that I got extra excited about was the idea that you could retain a sense of agency during the experience, because I think that's what freaks a lot of people out, especially people who've never done psychedelics, is the idea of losing that control. And then who knows what's going to happen, and you're stuck in this experience, and
yeah, never going to leave it. Yeah. took me a while to figure that out as a beneficial trait, because it was so different from the other medicines. Because it took me a while to understand the benefits of that as well. Because I had come from a space of working with these other big medicines and psilocybin and DMT, and like another thing you can do with cannabis as a psychedelic is like you can pause the experience. So if somebody needs to use the restroom, and they're like need to take a break, they can just take their eye covering off, sit up, and they'll be really, really high, but no longer in the psychedelic trip. And then go use the restroom, or we chat a little bit, they lay right back down, put their eye covering on, and then bam, it's right back there again in the full medicine experience. So it's just very unusual in that way and super surprising.
Well, I'd love to know a little bit more about that process that you just described, the difference between being high and having a psychedelic experience. What facilitates the difference?
Like the difference? Yeah, set and setting is the number one thing, right? And dosage. So not just the amount of medicine, but the type of medicine. So, like when I was younger in college and things, I came from a place where we didn't have access to good cannabis, right? It was marijuana, it was a dime bag or whatever you could get, and it made you pretty stoned, relaxed body, and made you giggly, and that was about it. And so, but mostly people are smoking to relax, or smoking to listen to music or watch a movie or to hang out with friends, right? So they're sitting up, they're hanging out with people. And so the setting's just a little different. They also get social, like in the negative traits of cannabis show up in those spaces too, like social anxiety or a little paranoia, right? And that points to setting too. They're in a space that's maybe a little less contained. So being high would be considered in the psychedelic literature would be called a psycholytic experience, which would be like meditation or therapy or aesthetically enhancing, right? And you're sitting up and chatting. So that's what I would consider being high, is psycholytic. Whereas if you increase the dosage and you increase the quality of the medicine and you make it a particular blend, and you invite the person to relax and not socialize, they can lay down, put an eye covering on. Pretty quickly, the journey turns into more of a psychedelic experience, particularly like a little bit of a stronger dose. And so the primary differences between like being high and the psychedelic would be intervisual experiences, very, very different orientation to time, right? It'll either feel like really, really fast, or the journey will feel like it's been all day or eternity. And then this more transpersonal space, right? Maybe the content is more spiritual or existential, right? Like it has a little bit more of an existential feeling to it. And then a lot of people in these inner spaces, they do a lot of life review. So in the psychotherapy literature, it's called a reconsolidation of memory, and it's a neurological function. But typically things that are unprocessed or incomplete in someone's life, they'll be like right there in their process, like as a real specific experience to address and to face and turn towards and breathe into and relax around and allow, and that's the healing of it. So it's a very different than just getting high, right? It's very much a psychedelic. But if you don't have, like if you're in a place that doesn't have good quality medicine, or you haven't smoked in 10 years, you might not have a context that cannabis can do this, because the quality of the medicine is increased, the potency, something called the terpene profile, which is the different fragrances that the medicine makes. All of those are factors in it being a psychedelic experience. And so it's, in some ways, it's our ability to do this is very new in this particular context and culture.
And the importance of having an intention, right? If someone is setting that when using it in this context, and that's what you're recommending in your book as well. And I think any psychedelic assisted therapy is talking about the importance of setting an intention. And so I could see how powerful that would be, that once the medicine kicks in, that you have this singular focus, and that will help hopefully steer you. Is that pretty consistent, that it will steer you in that direction?
Yeah, it'll steer you in that direction, but it's not like a linear path. It's a little curvier in that way, it's like a meandering path. So intention, I call it the compass of the journey, right? Like you're setting your intention as you're looking at your compass to know, okay, I want to go that way. I want to resolve something in my life. And so what we do with intention setting is typically in our clinic, if people are coming for real healing, like pretty significant healing. It's mostly trauma resolution, people who have diagnoses of PTSD or major depression, anxiety, things like that. And so they know why they're coming, right? They're struggling. And they typically understand why they're struggling. Something happened or there's a loss of vitality in life. And so the intention is pretty much front and center. And so what I do as a facilitator is I'll just invite them to share more about it, right? Tell me more about that. What else is there for you? And we'll unpack it. And I think what happens is in the brain, what's happening is these neural pathways into those particular memories or those particular feelings are starting to get activated and are starting to wake up. And then the medicine itself kicks in, and those neural pathways are already lit up. It amplifies that particular pathway into the memory or the experience or the blockage that's causing it. Sometimes people are looking for problem solving as an intention, right? Like there's a problem in their life. It's not necessarily psychological, but intellectual, right? A struggle or a problem. And it just activates those pathways, and then the medicine takes over. And allows for what we call like this holotropic principle. It's the Stan Grof's work in the psychedelic psychotherapy, is that if we allow ourselves to relax into an experience, then whatever is right there and whatever is necessary to look at will be right there. Just it'll be the first thing to show up. And so I invite my clients to turn towards, relax, allow, and to witness and to breathe into the experience and to accept it. And then that's where this resolution occurs, is the more they turn towards and not push away from whatever their inner struggle is, there will be like a flooding that occurs, a flowing out of and a clearing of this excess energy or residue in their psyche, their mind, and their body. And then under that is this inner essence that they are then able to tap into. And then that becomes more of a positive experience, like a space of exploration and play and reclaiming aspects of self, and then finding like it's almost like solutions just land in your lap. You don't have to figure it out; they just unfold out of the space. So it's a really wonderful and deeply inspiring space to get to share with people. And this is what I do. This is what we get to do as a profession. So I'm deeply inspired every time I sit for someone. And then I'm learning something about myself. That's the wild thing, is like, because they're going through some sort of pretty profound spiritual process. And to witness that allows me to look at my own stuff and heal and clear as well. And so it's just like it's like a collaborative transformational process,
I imagine it feels sacred to play that role, the role of a guide.
Yeah, I do consider it a sacred service, and not everybody steps into like these ideas of religious or spiritual practice, but it's part of my process for sure. We take the medicine with intention, either through a meditation or prayer. When I'm sitting in silence, as a person is going through their process, I might be sitting with compassion towards them, positive regard, and then sometimes I'll even pray with my clients. But to bear witness to the humanness of another at this deep of a level I consider it like an act of service, a sacred act of service, because we're also like our team members, myself. We're keepers of difficult memories. We don't ever forget the stories that are shared that our clients tell us. So we're bearing witness to someone's most profound struggle, right? And then to see not only the profound struggle and bear witness with acceptance of the humanness of that there's something about that intrinsic experience that's healing and that transformational. And so we not only are we seeing just suffering, right? We see the transformation of suffering into something else. And that's like call it like turning lead into gold, right? It's an alchemical process that's sacred.
It's crazy intimate work too. I mean, to be able to witness that transformation. I want to go back to the experience for a second, if I may.
Sure.
I wanted to find out if on the whole you notice that experiencers, they get kind of lost or sort of in the challenge or the difficulty that they're processing, or are they witnessing it from a distance?
Yeah, that's a good question. with that sense of agency, they never really get lost in it. Like sometimes we're, as a facilitator and guide, we're helping a person stay with something that's difficult, or to turn towards something that they wish to turn towards, or if, like not quite sure where to go with something, we'll invite them to breathe. But it's more of a both and quality. So imagine being fully immersed in an experience while simultaneously having this kind of objective witness aspect that's maintaining their sense of agency and feeling not re-traumatized by the experience. It's a very emotionally safe and supported experience. So it's more of a both and space that we invite our clients into, fully immersed and then also a little bit distant so they can remain objective and say, oh, now I understand why I had to go through that, or oh, now I understand, the karmic and familial consequences of ancestry and other things. It's like, oh, this makes more sense to me now. I can let this go now. Things like that.
The other thing that was really intriguing to me while reading your book was that you also can kind of dictate how much time the experience is going to last.
Mm-hmm.
Instead of like with other medicines that once you're in it until it fully goes through your system.
Yeah, so the duration of like what we call like the psychedelic cycle of cannabis is about an hour and a half long, right? And so it's not as long at all as these other big medicines. Psilocybin would be 4 to 6 hours. MDMA, 5 to 7 hours. LSD could be 8 or 12 hours. Those are really long medicines. So it's about an hour and a half, and it's super easy to just sit up and smoke more if you want to extend the journey. So I do mostly 5-hour sessions with about a 3.5 hour journey experience, and that's enough for most people. I consider that to be about half of a psilocybin journey. So what we do is we do 2 sessions, 2 days in a row. And so that's about the equivalent of a full psilocybin journey. But imagine being able to take a break in the middle of your journey, rest, resource, get some food in you, and then the next day come back to complete it. So there's a lot of benefits to that. But some of our facilitators here do a 3-hour session with about an hour and a half to 2-hour journey experience. And it's all about dosage. And then again, remember the set and setting, you can pause the experience. So when it's time to be done, you just say, okay, it's time to be done. I'm going to invite you to come back now. And the person sits up and comes back, and they might be feeling the medicine for a while, but it isn't these extreme psychedelic states that they don't feel comfortable or safe in anymore. It's
Gotcha.
Pretty amazing.
Yeah, it sounds incredible. Can you talk a little bit about combining strains to create these experiences?
Sure. So again, when I was younger, and a lot of people, it's just pot was pot, right? And there wasn't many choices. It's what you got from your friend, and it was pretty much all kind of had the same potency. And I've done some research on this, and it was about 10% THC, and also it included CBD in it. And the CBD would mitigate the psychedelic effects of the cannabis as well. But now in Colorado, for example, you can go to the store and you can choose from 20, 30 different varieties of the medicine. And the average potency is between 15 and 30%. So we're using pretty potent medicine on average of over 20% THC. And also the CBD has been bred out of these strains as well. So it doesn't mitigate some of the more psychedelic effects. But strains come in 3 primary families, so to speak. And in our culture, it's the sativas, indicas, and hybrids. So if you can imagine, sativa would be considered what you would use to get really high. It's a creative space. It's more of a stimulant. It allows people to focus. And it's also good for like going to parties and concerts and adventures. And it's good for aesthetically enhancing music experiences, art experientials, and things like that. But it can be kind of anxiety provoking if you take too much of it. On the opposite end of the spectrum is the indicas. And on the indicas, they're more sedating. This is like kind of this what you would colloquially call the stoner effect, where if you take too much, you're just sitting on the couch and really not doing much. It also kind of dulls the mind a little bit, and it's more body focused. It's relaxing. This is what people take to help them sleep or relax from a hard day of work, or or if they're struggling with anxiety, they might use it to calm their systems down. But it can kind of be make your mind a little on the dull side. But when you combine these two together, it's almost as if the negative traits, the anxiety and the dullness, get canceled out by the positive traits. So the positive trait of the amplified, awake sativa cancels out the dullness, and the relaxed state of the indica cancels out the anxiety of the sativa. And then when we add what we call the hybrids, which is kind of like in between sativas and indicas, the hybrids are more heart-opening. They're uplifting, but softer. They're emotionally supportive. And so when we combine all three together, what we call it is kind of like a gestalt of full spectrum psychedelic cannabis experience, where you have these awake, creative, uplifted space, and then your body is so relaxed, almost as if your body falls asleep. So it creates this kind of waking dream, lucid dream state with this like symbolic imagery and visuals. And then the hybrid opens the heart and allows for that like emotional support and emotional clarity as well. So that's my theory. And then we add other cannabinoids like CBN is another really good one. CBN will enhance the kind of inner visual experience of the psychedelic nature of the medicine, and it's also, when you take it by yourself, it's also a sedative. So this is what people take to sleep. But when you pair it with a high dose THC, it again helps alleviate all the anxiety, and it amplifies the psychedelic traits. So the body of the person is able to tolerate a higher dose of THC without having the anxiety or paranoia associated with strong cannabis experiences. We just dialed it in. I think what happened is we forgot how to use this medicine in a good way. I think there's definitely some ancient cultures and cultures around the world that still know how to use this medicine. But in our society in America, we just didn't know how to use it. And now that it was legalized, the medicine itself was able to flourish. And the medicines can be grown very cleanly now. And so you don't get the negative effects associated even with the pesticides or the molds or anything else that are sometimes contaminating the medicines. So it's a very clean experience and very, very potent.
So you just kind of stumbled on this? Because most people just will partake in one strain.
Right. I don't know how it happened. To be honest,
it was an accident.
It was a suggestion from a friend, a combination of an intuition. I've smoked different medicines and had different effects, and I thought, what would happen if we combined them? And it was also my training as a psychedelic facilitator, and I got my master's in transpersonal counseling. So it was just like this random combination of skills and traits that all came together in this particular moment in Boulder, Colorado. But the effects were pretty obvious immediately. Also luck, like if somebody had gifted me some older medicine to make my first blend with, and old medicine has more CBN in it. And so it took me a while to understand what that was, what that factor was. But eventually I was able to parse out that it was the inadvertent addition of CBN to the blend that made it more potent. I identify as a spiritual practitioner, and I believe that medicine has a spirit and an intelligence. And there's a part of me that is grateful for this opportunity to be called in this way and to be shown this.
It doesn't show. One of the things I wanted to ask you was, how has your relationship with the cannabis plant changed over this time?
Yeah, really wonderful question. I have a deep trust in the medicine now, and it took me a while to achieve, just because of like the healing of the war on drugs that I had to go through as well, and the stigma that was associated with it. And I've had the opportunity to bear witness to the healing that it's given other people. And I would say I've worked with other medicines. I'm not going to say it's like the only psychedelic medicine I would ever recommend or anything like that. It doesn't take the place of these other psychedelic medicines. But in my own personal healing process, like I've stored a lot of tensions and injuries in my body that have caused me some struggles in my life. And it has been not just what would be the word? It doesn't just alleviate the tensions and pains or cover them up. It actually helps heal them. It actually helps reduce the inflammation and resolve the struggles that we have. And then as I stepped more into that work and into the healing, it started to become this incredible tool of problem solving, right? And so in my own session work, I've had the opportunity to understand and resolve a lot of big questions for my own life, and from the transpersonal and existential to like the just straight up practical. Like, how do I build this practice, and how do I share this in a way that people understand? And it's just like nuts and bolts and such. I have been a regular consumer of this medicine for a long time, and more recently I'm taking longer and longer breaks from it. And that's been a wonderful part of this journey as well. We call them medicine fast. And that's allowed me to really deepen my relationship with it as well. So I would say it's like it's a plant medicine. It's a spirit. It has its own evolution as well. And I feel like I'm kind of evolving with it. And it's like a good friend of mine now. You know, the spirit of the medicine comes to me sometimes in these session works. And it's like a very feminine, motherly spirit, but very powerful as well. Very nurturing, and also very trusting of me and my clients to do the work they need to do. So it's just very giving. It's just a very giving and sharing medicine, and soft and gentle. And so I think more than anything, I've just developed a greater and greater appreciation for this plant.
And relationship.
Oh, it's a wonderful relationship. Absolutely.
Yeah. I mean, it's just is a no-brainer to me that you're working with this plant ally so closely, so intimately, to be of service to others, that it's a team effort. The medicine, of course, is doing all of the heavy lifting and guidance and all of that, but you're playing a big role in that as well, or anyone who's working with this medicine would be.
Yeah, we work with a variety of practitioners, ministers and psychotherapists and such. In some ways, we have to invite our psychotherapists to work less hard, to let go of some of the having to be on the entire journey experience, because it's like having a co-facilitator in a room that's like a master facilitator. And so you kind of bounce off of it. And my job is to be there and to offer support or a suggestion every now and again when it's required. And then if I need to be more active, my job is to help someone stay with something that's unfolding that might be difficult. And then the third partner in these relationships would be the client themselves. Like, again, like I've learned to really trust my client's capacity to know exactly where they need to go to resolve something, even if it's that meandering path that it isn't always clear in the beginning of, where are we headed here? I've just really learned to trust a person's capacity to know exactly what they need to do, even if they don't even know what they need to do. So in a way, it's like you said, it's like a collaboration. It's like, I call it, like I use the analogy of being on a boat, a sailing ship, and we're all on the same ship together. We're all engaging the same phenomenon, but we have different perspectives and different roles in the experience.
It probably clearly shows that I don't have a lot of knowledge about cannabis, the cannabis plant, although I'm wanting to change that. I think I had some earlier experiences in my life that were a bit overwhelming or scary, because it was a long time ago when cannabis was, when it was more weed, like you were talking about before, and I think I steered clear of it. But when I don't know if you're familiar with Martin Lee. He's the co-founder of Project CBD.
Oh yeah, I saw him on your
podcast, the investigative journalist. Yeah, he's the one who got me really excited about the idea of. He was just talking about how this plant is. We've gotten so disconnected from it. We just don't know what the possibilities are. He was giving the idea that we just are tapping into a tiny bit of the possibility. And that's really exciting. And this plant it seems it's so incredibly versatile.
Yeah.
And can be such a powerful ally.
Yeah. It's like the giving tree. It's like, what do you need? And she'll say, here you go. You need to sleep, here you go. You need to wake up, here you go.
Exactly.
You need to grow or make some clothing, here you go. You need to build a house, here you go. You need to calm your anxiety down, here you go. I tell people, I think I'm about I agree with Martin on this one. I think we're at about, my understanding is about 3% of what I believe is potential with this medicine. So we work with a handful of cannabinoids and THC, and there's over 100 cannabinoids. We work with like 9 or 10 terpene different, like primary terpenes, but there's several hundred terpenes in this medicine. They're actually manufacturing and rebuilding new cannabinoids with CBD as its foundation. So even new cannabinoids are being created with modern science right now for different functions and uses as well. So like I regularly sit with the most profound psychedelic experiences that a person can have, and I think we're at about 3% of working the potential of this medicine. I'm
kind of crazy, yeah.
It is really, like in ancient traditions, it was considered a sacred plant, and there's some theories that point to it being the tree of life, and a remover of illness and injury on the planet. And in the ancient Sanskrit, they call it the creator of samadhi, the plant that gives the gift of samadhi, which is one of the highest states a human can achieve. And I really believe that as well. I think ancient Hindu culture, Indian culture, was intertwined with the use of this medicine, and it was a pretty advanced civilization.
Yeah, we've gone astray, haven't we? Just a tad.
Something happened. Maybe something, I don't know, some sort of
a
injury.
lot of things, yeah.
That
yeah,
happened,
well, yeah.
These medicines are here to help us wake back up.
I think we
heal.
got severed from the natural world when we started manipulating it for our needs. So,
right.
Yeah, in other words, it stopped being a relationship, and it started being more of the word that's coming, like a shopping mall or a grocery store.
Right, a commodity, right?
Yeah, exactly, yeah.
Even, the shadow side of cannabis cultivation is like the factory farms as well, and the overuse of pesticides, and like the amount of energy that cannabis is used, it takes to grow. These are shadow aspects of it, and so we work with small growers and in natural settings, and some of the places where cannabis could be the most beneficial as a crop would be southern United States, and that's where it's most prohibited. But you could grow it outside, and there's plenty of water, and it would really help the economies of really poor communities, and that's where it's most prohibited. But there's still a lot to do. But I'm really fortunate that I'm where I am in this position, but I also recognize that the war on drugs, there's still people going to jail for this medicine, and that's just not appropriate. That's not ethical. So we're
no, it's fucked up, is what it is.
Well,
so.
Yeah, like I was trying to be polite about the word, but yes, it's very much a total cluster.
It's a clusterfuck. Yeah, it is. You can say it. I did.
It's a tragedy, I think that's more like what I would call it, is like a really significant tragedy for people.
Yeah, absolutely. Especially just knowing this little bit that you're discovering and other people are discovering about the potential, the possibilities.
Yeah.
So I wanted to talk a little bit about what you've noticed around healing for things such as depression and anxiety and post-traumatic stress and, I don't know, addiction or anything along those lines that you want to share.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I would invite people to, if you're struggling, to use this medicine with intention. I would say, it's one of the things I've learned is it's totally okay to use on a regular basis for symptom management. Like, thank God there's this medicine that's herbal that can help alleviate anxiety and depression. That's not a pharmaceutical like Prozac or something like alcohol, which kills people. Cannabis doesn't kill people. So I think it's totally okay to use on an ongoing basis, on a daily basis, but there's so much shame because it's been prohibited and made wrong for so long that people are living in that shame. And so the invitation is to just let go of that shame and know that you're okay. Know that it's a plant, it's an herb, it's a flower, and that's all it is. And then within that, though, like if you read my book or come visit us, our center is called the Center for Medicinal Mindfulness. We work as facilitators, and we're able to do really deep dives and heal the root causes of why someone's struggling. And there's a lot of theory behind that, and grounded science, but as well as like a spiritual unfolding too. And so it's a wonderful trauma resolution tool. So Oftentimes, anything like anxiety or depression is rooted in trauma, in some form of trauma, even if it's not your own. It might be family or ancestry or even past life trauma. These other most mental health symptoms that I've kind of figured out is all trauma related. So when you're able to explore and heal the underlying trauma, all of the other symptoms start to reduce. People sleep better. They just feel better. They have more energy, and they have more meaning in their lives. And then it's also, we call it a somatic psychedelic. So it's not just healing mental health injuries, it's also healing physical injuries as well. So chronic pain is another thing that cannabis is really good at addressing, including like autoimmune. What we find, like a lot of autoimmune disorders are associated with injuries and trauma as well. So when you heal the underlying causes of the trauma, sometimes autoimmune injuries, chronic fatigue, fibromyalgia, rheumatoid arthritis, these are things I've seen like have spontaneous healing in these sessions where people are just like radically different after the experiences. And it appears to be like a permanent change. Like, I don't have this is still very new, and, I'm not research oriented, but I am working with a research team now to study this. And so we should have some data to show the efficacy at some point in the next few years. But it's pretty obvious on a case-by-case basis that we're changing lives, and that means it's a deeply meaningful experience to me. If somebody has a question about whether or not this medicine could work, just invite them to connect with our team, and we do a free session where we check in and see if it's a good fit, and then we invite them to Colorado to do some session work with us. And the other wonderful thing about this medicine is that we can even do the session work online. So if somebody has access to the medicine, it's safe enough even as a psychedelic to do the work online, and we're able to play music for our clients. They're laying in their own bed with eye coverings on, and we're able to guide them through the experience through the internet now. And that's a new thing. We figured out how to do that when we were living through COVID and everything was shut down. That's what kept our program going.
Yeah, I think a lot of folks got very creative during that time.
I call it my forced evolution.
Yeah, no shit. One of the things I wanted to ask you was, it's actually, someone had pointed this out to me. I guess Rick Doblin at a talk said that we know cannabis is palliative but not curative for post-traumatic stress disorder. Mm-hmm. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I guess I'm not too surprised he would say that. I think that's a common belief that it's palliative, meaning symptom management, right? It helps you relieve the suffering. I think he's been an advocate for MDMA and MDMA-assisted psychotherapy as a quote cure for
that is his thing,
PTSD.
Yeah.
That's his orientation and his thing.
Yeah.
And I haven't talked to Rick about this myself. I've given him the opportunity. I believe he knows of our work, but maybe not that much. Again, we're very new to this, and I would politely disagree that it is curative, but it has to be done in the right context. And I believe Rick doesn't have that particular context that we do. So again, the quality of the medicine in the right set and setting, and then guided through a particular protocol, which is actually congruent with MDMA-assisted psychotherapy. I was one of the first interns of the very first MAPS MDMA studies here in Boulder.
No kidding.
And so I was trained by MAPS to work with MDMA. And so what I was able to do is just translate those skill sets into work using cannabis as a psychedelic. And again, what it does, it has the psychedelic effect similar to psilocybin. So it has the therapeutic uses similar to psilocybin-assisted therapy, which would be like depression, end-of-life anxiety, existential and spiritual exploration. But it also has, especially with the blends, and again, the blends is a very novel thing that nobody really talked about until this work came online. When you have these particular blends, it works similar to MDMA in the therapeutic setting. So it provides a sense of safety and support similar to MDMA. It allows for the somatic discharge, the shaking out the trauma similar to MDMA. And it also allows for what's called the reconsolidation memory, which has to do with relaxing the tension in the amygdala. It softens. It's like, this is what MDMA does as well. But there's studies that cannabis shows that it softens the amygdala, which allows for the reduction of the fight or flight response and the reemergence of memories so that they can be fully processed through our neurology. So it does all of the same traits as MDMA, and it's just something that's not fully understood yet. And then the benefit of cannabis over MDMA is that cannabis can be used like regularly. So we do 2 sessions in 2 days, but then it could be weekly after that. And it's not neurotoxic. Cannabis is neuroregenerative. Whereas MDMA is neurotoxic, and it floods the system with too much serotonin and other things, and it creates a depression afterwards. And it can only be used, like in the MDMA studies, it's used 3 times, 4 to 6 weeks apart, and that's it. Anything more than that's not very safe. But with cannabis, you can stay with it and continue the work until you feel complete enough to not take it anymore. And so, and it also has a non-addictive quality. So we didn't talk about that piece, but even people who claim to have cannabis addictions, we're able to work with this medicine to help them heal their cannabis addiction, because they're using it, quote unquote, addiction would be using regularly to alleviate suffering. And what we're able to do with these practices is to get to under the root causes of that suffering, so people start naturally using less cannabis when they use it more skillfully. So there's a lot of benefits, and I prefer it over MDMA as a therapeutic tool. But again, that's a very new concept, and I understand that not everybody has that belief, even in the psychedelic community.
Right. Just real quick comment about, I heard that cannabis is not physiologically addicting, but it can be psychologically addicting. Is that true or no?
Well, I think any medicine, even this, all the other psychedelics can have that. Like, I want to go back to that state, right? We call it bliss hopping, just constantly staying into these higher states of consciousness and not wanting to return to the real world. So I think all the medicines can do that, but it isn't physiologically addictive, like coffee or tobacco,
nicotine,
like nicotine. Yeah. Like nicotine is extremely addictive.
Brutally addictive.
And, yeah. Again, if you can address the underlying reasons why someone's smoking daily, they typically tend to start smoking less. And again, unless there's like some other addictive traits, maybe they're drinking as well and things like that. But typically we use cannabis to get off of other substances, and then you titrate off of the medicine itself. But physically addictive, it's like you might have if you're a regular user, you might have a few days of restlessness, not able to sleep super well. But that goes away in less than a week. There's no real strong desire or urge to it. But if you're using it to cope with trauma, then that would be what you would call like psychologically addictive. But again, I've learned to trust this medicine. If somebody's using on a daily basis, that might be the only resource they have to feel some level of safety and support. They might not be able to afford to go to a psychotherapist on a regular basis. So even in the context of addiction, I would be soft around that. What we see, I think, maybe in like overuse with cannabis would be the concentrates. There's something called waxes and dabs, which is like if cannabis were the equivalent of like a draft beer, waxes and dabs would be like 100 proof alcohol. So that's when people start taking too much and using, kind of blasting their neural pathways a little bit with this medicine. But even then we can help them. We just shift them to flower and then shift them out of flower to CBD and shift them again, clear it, But the other thing is I also don't work with teens their brains are still developing and things like that. So I don't want to minimize the concern that families have and parents have about their teens and things like that. But that's just pretty far away from my world that I work in. And then I would be asking, what is the underlying reason they're smoking, and address that as well as an initial thing.
All right. So you wrote this book, Psychedelic Cannabis, and it seems like it's not just for a practitioner,
right,
like myself, but for anyone.
Right.
So you are encouraging people to, well, of course, buy your book, but to experiment on their own, because it's a really thorough, lovely guide on how to do this for yourself.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I
Yeah,
live in Vermont where it is legal now.
yeah. I wrote the book after I went to a conference in LA with a friend of mine who's on our board, Travis Cox. He's an eco psychologist, and we were having some pretty significant discussions around the collapse of our ecology and the major world events that we're all going through. And this was even before COVID, right? So we're all coming out of a major global crisis where things were completely shut down. And I realized that not every, and also had a very clear understanding that not everybody can afford my services. We're doing everything we can to make them as accessible as possible, but it's like equivalent of, like 8 hours of psychotherapy in one day, right? It's not inexpensive, even with groups. So we do groups as well to make them more affordable. And then we also have monthly community circles. So we do online and in-person community circles, which are very affordable too in comparison. But cannabis is a safe medicine, and I wanted to get the information out there as soon as possible. And I wanted to invite people to feel that they could do this themselves and feel empowered. And so I don't go into the theory particularly in this book. That would be a second book that was in my head for practitioners on how to facilitate with it and the theory behind it. But the book itself is a how-to guide, everything you need to know, from how to make the blends, how to set up your space, what materials and supplies you need, how to take the medicine with sacred or mindful intention, and then mindfulness skill sets. So a lot of the book is mindfulness skill sets that are like intrinsic to not just journey and have a psychedelic experience on cannabis, but also to heal and resolve trauma. And that felt like it was a really significant, important part of my own path. It was like a compulsion. There was a moment in my life where I had to write that book to like calm my own psyche down.
I know that feeling.
And so, yeah, it was a very real.
It's
it was
annoying.
A very real experience. It took over my life.
It's like
for
a
about
tension
5 weeks.
inside of you, and then it doesn't get released until you
And
get
it
the
doesn't
words out.
Feel good. Yeah, you got to physically type them out.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, so I'm just really grateful. So I self-published at first, and then it got picked up by Inner Traditions.
Yeah, they're down the road
And,
from me. I end up talking to a lot of Inner Traditions authors. Not because they're down the road from me.
I learned a lot from working with Inner Traditions and their editors and publishers. I became a better writer working with them, so I'm really grateful for that experience.
Well, yeah, you want that in a publishing house to actually help you be better. That would be ideal. So how do folks get a hold of you then? Like if they want to explore some of your online offerings or take a trip out to Colorado?
Yeah. So it's super easy. It's medicinalmindfulness.org, and there's a subpage called Contact or Inquire, and you just fill out a little form, and we invite you to schedule a session, a 20-minute session to learn more about our work and get to know your process more. And like I said, we have a whole team here, so I would invite people to check out Medicinal Mindfulness and look at the practitioner pages and see if there's a particular person that you're drawn to work with. And then we also there's a section on events on our website as well. And like I said, we're doing about monthly community circles. So if you're not sure you want to come out, or you think cannabis can't be a psychedelic, I don't know what this guy's talking about, and you want to just try it out, we have these community circles, and they meet here locally here at our office in Boulder, but it's also online. So Vermont has probably really good medicine. So I'd love to have you, Wendy, to come to one of our circles and really actually just try it out. And so that would be what I would explore. And then on the training side, I work with a lot of facilitators. I have several hundred students right now. It's an international program, and that program is called Psychedelic Sitter School, and that website's psychedelicsitterschool.org. And it's online and in person as well. Our next class is in March. We have multiple cohorts here in Boulder and Berkeley and online, and we're trying to get to the East Coast, so we're building a cohort on the East Coast as well.
Maybe Vermont.
And so it's just yeah, I'd love to. I do visit people, and we do set up circles for local communities, and that's always a beautiful experience. I worked with a Jewish community in Berkeley not long ago. That was a beautiful experience. So like people who've never taken a psychedelic, and those who are like what we'd call a seasoned psychonaut, everybody gets a lot out of working with cannabis. And so I know how to work with everybody.
All right. Well,
You
then
know?
you heard him, folks. That's awesome.
Yep.
Well, yeah, I hope I can join you at some point. That would be amazing. I would like to actually do the practitioner training if I'm
Oh, it would be great to have
it's
you.
open to, it's
Hmm.
not just for psychotherapists, it's for anyone, right? Who's interested in
That's
being a
right.
guide or a
It's about
sitter.
50-50. Yeah, about half of our clientele, our student population, are like some form of mental health professional. Not everybody's licensed. And then the other half are people who are wanting to step into the career of psychedelic therapy and psychedelic guiding, and they don't have any clinical background. And so, we know how to work with everybody and make sure they feel good enough and skillful enough in their experience to do this. And then the foundational classes are all cannabis related. But I don't know if you know, but Prop 122 just passed in Colorado, which legalized
I
psilocybin,
did hear about
DMT,
that. Yep.
non-peyote mescaline, and even ibogaine. And so we're
Oh, wow.
stepping
Okay, I
into
didn't know all of that.
facilitating. Yeah. So we're teaching people how to facilitate with these other medicines as
That's
well.
brilliant. Okay.
So we have a really robust program. It's great. It was like true honor. Like again, I was just so surprised that we can do this work so openly now, and it's such a gift.
The mental health world is changing, and I'm really heartened by that. It's very exciting, really exciting.
Agreed. It's a new revolution in consciousness for sure.
Yep,
Yeah.
a much needed one.
Hmm.
I'm just going to ask you a really quick practical question.
Sure.
The licensing board in Colorado, did they give you any shit around using cannabis in your practice?
Yeah, no, I actually went through a process where our whole program was reviewed by our licensing board, and the outcome was that the way we set it up and our safety protocols and in our therapeutic protocols, and we have non-licensed professionals. I'm a non-licensed professional, but my wife is a licensed psychotherapist, a licensed professional counselor. And we pretty much, all of us came to the conclusion that it's safe to all of us work with this medicine as a psychedelic, the licensed practitioners and the unlicensed practitioners. We have full liability insurance for working with cannabis and ketamine because we have a medical doctor on staff as well. And that it's totally fine. It's just all about the proper disclosure, being completely forward with your client, who you are and what they're getting into. And so we have 2 ministers on staff. We have 2 licensed counselors, 2 pre-licensed counselors, and then people like myself. I have therapeutic training, but I don't identify as a psychotherapist per se.
Mm-hmm.
I almost consider this more of a mindfulness practice than anything. And so, yeah, we've been, this is the benefit of being around a little while, is that we've, gone through some hoops with regulatory agencies and things. And I think that will, is constantly changing and things. But right now, DORA, which is the Colorado regulatory organization, is now having to contend with these other big medicines. And so we believe we're a good model for these other medicines. And we're going to keep doing what we're doing. And then as the regulations change, we'll continue to engage them and do the best we can to be good advocates.
Very cool.
So yeah,
Thanks for going down that little side street with me for a second.
no, that's a really important one
Yeah.
to name. So I'm really grateful you asked it. Not everybody knows to ask that question.
It's like asking for a friend. I for
Yeah, for sure.
myself, really, more than anything.
Yeah, no. Of course, I don't know Vermont, right? And every state's different. So, but we have students in a lot of states, and some of them it isn't even recreationally legal, and we're able to help them work under the medical model and medical card model and all of that. And so far, nobody's had an issue. And of course, we really do our best to work with people who are not negligent as well, right? So, of course, negligence is another issue completely. But so far, over 10 years, we haven't had any issues. So, really grateful for that. Canada, totally legal in Canada. It's super easy to do this practice in Canada. And other places are starting to legalize as well.
Yeah, hopefully we're not too far away from that here in the United States.
Yeah, I'm not going to hold my breath, but I keep praying for it.
I hear you, brother. Yeah. So,
Yeah.
big thank you for coming on the show. I really, really appreciated this conversation. There's a lot packed in there, so I really appreciate your time. Thank you, Daniel, so much.
Yeah, thank you for what you do too, Wendy. Thank you so much for having me.
Who knew cannabis could be so versatile? Clearly I didn't. I was already really excited about the possibilities that psychedelic-assisted therapy could offer the field of mental health. But after talking with Daniel, it seems that cannabis-assisted therapy is an accessible, gentle way to experience powerful healing. I find myself looking forward to exploring these possibilities. Who knows? Maybe the practitioner training is in my future. If you'd like to learn more about Daniel and the Psychedelic Therapy Center he created in Boulder, Colorado, please visit medicinalmindfulness.com. You can find a link in the show notes, along with links to check out the Magical Path Shamanic Workbook. Thank you for listening, and a special thanks to Stephanie and Joanne for your generous donations to the podcast. And thank you for supporting Lucid Cafe by giving it a positive review, sharing this episode with someone who you think might be interested, or by making a donation of any amount using the link in the show notes. That about does it for this episode. Until next time.